Okay, PHEVs are not the answer. It's the Great PHEV Debate. Perfect electric car option or EV dead end. Best of both worlds or a waste of time and money? Welcome. I'm CarsGuide editor, deputy editor James Cleary, and joining me on the CarsGuide podcast panel for this electrifying automotive cage fight, our managing editor, head of video, Matt Campbell.
G'day.
As well as our EV guide lead, Tom White.
Hello.
We'll also cover off this week in news and take a look at the fresh metal we've been driving in Cars in the Garage. And we're on standby to respond to your feedback in the YouTube live stream. So stay with us. I've written a news story weighing up the worth of plug-in hybrid vehicles, and its development generated a bit of heat in the office. So we're seeing, one side of the argument is plug-in hybrids, best of both worlds, with enough battery power to allow meaningful zero emissions driving around town, an extended road trip range with easy, rapid refueling, courtesy of a fuel tank and a combustion engine. But there are some downsides. And Matt Campbell, let's get to you. I sense you have a different view of things.
Well, partly, yes. They are both compromised and amazing in both that they can be really, really smart vehicles in that if you can find enough battery driving range emissions and zero emissions if you've got solar as well, and you can do, say, 80, 85 kilometers of electric driving before you need to call on the petrol engine or diesel engine. There's not many diesels, though. It seems like a really, really smart idea. But if you consider the counterpoint to that being, well, if you just bought a regular hybrid car, and using less fuel because you're not lugging around batteries, electric motors, and all the extra weight that comes with it, which can impact the practicality of the car as well. And I think honestly, the biggest issue with PHEV, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles in Australia is price. If you are looking at the equivalent plug-in hybrid version of an Outlander or a Ford Escape, you're looking at $15,000 or so. And for a lot of people, $15,000 is not justifiable to be able to drive electric only some of the time.
Well, I mean, Tom, we can get to the price equation, and we've got some relativities. Actually, funny you mentioned the Outlander, Matt, because I've got some back-to-back kind of stuff on Outlander and Outlander PHEV. What do you make of that? It seems like it's a long time to amortize any kind of extra cost at point of purchase. And savings in terms of fuel.
I think the cynic would say that plug-in hybrids are a really convenient solution in markets where there are requirements to get emissions down. So, and they've served that purpose absolutely in Europe, where they're plentiful because they help bring fleet emissions targets down for a lot of business buyers as well. So there is a bit of a cynical argument you could have in there, because they do genuinely bring, like, if you use a plug-in hybrid properly, they can genuinely bring your fuel consumption down to very minimal levels.
Yep.
As an example, I've just handed back the keys for a Kia Niro plug-in hybrid, and that is now discontinued. There is no plug-in hybrid version of the new one in Australia. But there was 1 month there where using both the electric and the combustion functions, I achieved the stated fuel consumption of 2.1 litres to 100 kilometres, which is pretty damn impressive for a little car like that, and totally achievable as well if you're using it as intended.
There wasn't any relationship between you handing the car back and it being discontinued in this market, was there? Was that sort of a causal relationship?
I don't think I was that hard on it.
But it does speak to the fact that if Kia Australia, a brand that is pushing the boundaries with new energy vehicles, it's got a plug-in hybrid Sorento, for example. It had a plug-in hybrid Niro, and it's got the EV6 electric car and Niro as well, EV. So if a brand like it can't justify a smaller plug-in hybrid vehicle And it stands to reason that it's a difficult argument to have for Australian customers as well, because I think the real thing is that it's a more affordable car, but the step up in price doesn't make it affordable anymore.
Well,
and so, you know, if you've
yeah,
what
no, sorry, go ahead.
If you are splitting the difference between petrol and full electric, or hybrid and full electric, then yeah, maybe it makes sense. But if you're ultimately very, very close to an electric car price, as the case would have been with the next generation Kia Niro PHEV to the EV, it just doesn't make sense as a business case or for a customer.
Well, Matt, you've got someone on your side of the fence here with Kenneth Hollowbone saying, I just don't see the value in EV and PHEV at the moment based on price proposition. The other thing it brings in is, I suppose, charging. You know, to make best use of it, you've got to have access to either some nearby out-of-home charging or overnight charging, getting into that routine, putting in a wall box type charger. All of that adds complexity to the ownership proposition, I suppose.
I think there's another argument to be made there that, look, I mean, my takeaway generally from driving plug-in hybrids is you have to have a plug in your garage if you want them to make sense. Like if you can drive out of your garage every morning with a genuine 60 to 80 kilometer electric range, fantastic. If you don't have a plug in your garage or you're forced to park on the street or something, I don't think they make sense for a lot of people because you have to charge them up at a public charger. And unlike an EV, like a full EV, generally you'll get quite a fast AC charger where you're plugging up at those, you know, public locations, your shopping centers, what have you. And you might get a decent range from that in an EV because those AC inverters are quite powerful because it comes with the cost of the car. Whereas in a plug-in hybrid, you know, there's always this kind of element of trying to get the cost down to get people into them. And so their AC inverters tend to be quite slow. So it's much harder to charge up most plug-in hybrids at a session at the shops because they're not much faster than just plugging them into the wall generally.
That's right. That's such a good point. And I suppose it's easier where in urban areas, charging infrastructure is accelerating. You know, the installation of chargers here, there, and everywhere is happening at a pretty rapid rate. If you're outside, if you're in a rural or regional area, you're not exactly feeling the love at this point in terms of that kind of infrastructure. You probably do have to put something into your garage or somewhere in your house to be able to charge the car. And if you're doing, a couple of 100 kilometers in a day, you're going to get a certain amount of EV running. The vast majority of PHEV vehicles have the ability to charge the battery on the fly, as it were, but you are still going to end up using the petrol engine for a lot of the time when you're out on the road. And I'm right in saying that, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. And like for us, for instance, years ago, I ran a Mitsubishi PHEV, first generation one, and required the installation of a 15 amp plug. To give you an idea, that just means that the bottom prong on the plug is just a bit bigger, and it made it charge just a little bit quicker than a normal plug would. But you know, it was fine, and I would get 55 to 60 kilometers of EV range out of that. I live 65 to 70 kilometers away from where I'm going to the office, for example, or to the city or whatever. And that means that one way was electric, the other way was petrol. So I was always still using 6 liters per 100 Ks, as well as plugging it in and charging myself money to keep the thing electrified. So for a lot of people, it's not going to work depending on where you live. And I think, JC, you make a really good point. It's where you live that dictates whether this car or these types of cars will be suitable for you. Because if you are 40 kilometers from the city or 30 kilometers from the city and you have to travel to work, or if you're 30 Ks from wherever you need to go to work or to school or whatever, then this sort of car could be perfect if you set up the charging in your house. And I think this is the problem. There's so many ifs that it makes it a really strong and difficult case to have for majority of buyers.
Well, I mean, what are we talking? When you've got a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, I think your range is somewhere it's one of the upper ones. Here we go.
Yeah.
Ford Escape PHEV, 56 kilometers. And then the Outlander PHEV, 84. Yeah. So in terms of urban dwellers, brilliant. You know, you're probably worried about your fuel going stale. rather than whether or not the engine's going to burst into life. But yes, if you're on the highway all day, it's not going to add up in the same way. And by the way, while we've been chatting, our old mate Planes, Trains and Dogs and Cars confirmed that it pays to be cynical in 2022. So that's nice. I think he's on board with that. And he also says try and get a charge at the shops and wait for a busy charger is too stressful if you can't do that at home. And charger etiquette is very much an issue as well, isn't it? The whole, I'll put it on the charger and go and get a cup of coffee, hitting the shops and coming back forever after. And people are waiting to use the charger.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an area of future regulation, right? Like people are actually going to have to start thinking about this and other stuff like which cars get priority when we pull up at a charger, right? So,
yes.
If you've got like a 350 kilowatt charger and a 50 kilowatt charger next to it, and someone shows up in a Nissan Leaf and plugs into the 350 kilowatt charger and then you pull up 5 minutes later in an Ioniq 5 and you're just grinding your teeth thinking, why didn't you just plug into the 50 kilowatt? It's all you can use,
That's true too. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Richard Berry said it a couple of podcasts ago. We're living, as motoring journos, we're living in 2024. We're a couple of years ahead in the sense that we're getting pretty strong exposure to electrified vehicles now, and it's only now that people are thinking about maybe my next car or even the one after that might be electrified. But these issues are coming up because we're driving electric vehicles all the time.
Yeah. And to that point, JC, I think that we are overexposed generally to, like you say, to an electrified car market. In reality, sales are pretty small still of electrified cars, whether they're full-scale hybrids. I mean, Toyota dominates that part of the market, but plug-in hybrids are minuscule in Australia because, there aren't that many around until you start looking. And you'll see in James's written piece that there are quite a few around if you start looking. It's just a matter of being open to the options that are available to you and also being able to afford them, as I keep saying. But I do want to also say that I was reading up on this a little bit before about Europe and the market in Europe with plug-in hybrids. They are tanking over there because a lot of the incentives for plug-in hybrids have been pulled away, which I think is actually going to lead to an event in Australia where we become a bit of a ground for plug-in hybrid cars because the market there is dictating that if you want subsidies, you've got to get full electric cars, and that's where your emissions need to be anyway. So all the laws are suggesting that plug-in hybrids are dead. They're dead in the water, like regular hybrids, like regular engine cars.
That's it. We're a PHEV backwater. We're a PHEV backwater already.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, it's great for Australian consumers because it means that they'll be able to potentially get more affordable plug-in hybrid vehicles from those European brands that they might want to be able to buy a plug-in hybrid from.
Yes. Well, I mean, just for a sec, let's go there and look at the comparative, a like-for-like comparison in terms of how much fuel you might save with a PHEV. And courtesy of our own Richard Berry having spent some time long-term with a petrol combustion engine Outlander, and then more recently having experienced the latest plug-in hybrid version, the official combined cycle number for the PHEV is 1.5 litres per 100 kilometres. But in pure city driving, he saw 0.7 of a litre per 100 kilometres. And he specifically went out on a combination of country roads, motorways, went up to 110 kilometres an hour. It wasn't many Ks, but it was still at 2 litres per 100. Then over a longer range was about 5. The petrol one, the official figure is 8.1. His lowest average for a month was 10.2, and he saw as much as 15.2. So it's clear that in the right circumstance, there are some substantial savings to be made.
But how long would it take? I think the thought you've got to have. How long would it take to break even with, the combustion car? So I've invested so much more in my plug-in hybrid. How many years am I looking at before I'm actually breaking even on the fuel cost?
Yeah.
I'd say it's going to be a very long time.
I think
And then you
Fearless
also,
leader Mal did that, didn't he? He came out to 15 years or something on one
yeah.
day. Anyway,
And
sorry,
you
Matt.
also have to factor in the resale considerations as well, because if no one wants them now, no one's going to want them in 10 years' time either. So you won't be getting as much money back as if you had maybe bought a full hybrid or an EV. And if you do consider those numbers, JC, 1.5 liters per 100 kilometers, that's for the first 100 Ks.
It is.
For every 100 Ks after that, you cannot get that figure because you will always be using the petrol engine.
Well, you've depleted
and also,
your
let me
80
say,
odd kilometers of EV range, haven't you? In that first 100. Absolutely.
If you are using 84 kilometers of EV range, that means you're using about an average of 10 liters per 100 kilometers to do the remaining 16 Ks, which is inefficient when you think about it.
That's right.
And I like to think about these things because I think that the fuel figure numbers that we see on the stickers on the windscreens of cars are utter nonsense. And B, people don't think about 100 kilometers. They think, well, a tank of fuel, how much does it cost to fill the tank? How many Ks am I going to get out of a tank? And people are still thinking that way. They're not thinking per 100 kilometers.
Correct. It's interesting also, we've had a comment in real time. Lars Dane says, it's a broader EV question, I suppose. Are we ready for EVs? Is the grid ready to cope with mass adoption of electric vehicles with thousands of people putting in wall boxes at home and charge points going in all over the place? And it's true. I mean, what does he say? We have blackouts in summer when people are using their air conditioners. Add a whole new fleet of EV vehicles to that, and you've got a real concern.
There are a few concerns around that, but I think it's also worth remembering that you're charging an EV up overnight, and so generally, that's what most owners are doing, and that's when power's at its cheapest and most available. So there's an element of kind of smoothing out the demand in the grid using an EV, and there are EVs that are actually able to power your home coming online now very slowly in Australia, waiting for regulations and such. So I think there's a bit of a changing of the power dynamic in Australia in that way, how power is generated, how it's stored. Now that everyone's got 50 kilowatt hours of batteries just sitting in their garage, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that.
Would it be true to say, Tom, that vehicle to, or whatever the acronym is, but vehicle to your house supply is more relevant when it's full EVs, where they've got the big bopper batteries rather than a PHEV, which is sort of a halfway house in terms of its battery size?
I think so, but I think it's also worth remembering that a lot of the newer plug-in hybrid vehicles, like the Outlander that are coming out, actually have really large batteries. We're talking sort of 15 kilowatt hours to 18 kilowatt hours. That's a big battery. And I think I was reading somewhere before that you only need about that much to power a home for a full day.
Right.
So, that's something worth considering as well. It comes with other knock-on benefits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're running up against it in terms of time, but suffice it to say, as you mentioned, Matt, we've got around 20 PHEV models that are currently in market. We've got more coming, Jeep Grand Cherokees and Mazdas and Range Rovers and VWs and a whole bunch more. So they're coming. But I suppose you have to be, what are you doing? You've got to be really sensible and selective about whether or not it's going to suit not just your circumstance, but whether you're going to be disciplined enough to recharge this thing all the time to get the benefit. I suppose ultimately an inductive charge loop where you just drive into your garage and as soon as you're parked, it starts to charge. That's a bit of a game changer, but we're not exactly seeing that just yet. The physical act of having to do something, we're so lazy that you're more likely to just drive it on petrol and carry that battery and motor around. So what our conclusion is, just be sensible about whether or not it's right for you. Yeah. And it's probably not for people in rural areas, but city, yes, if you get into the charging habit.
I think the takeaway is you really have to be an enthusiast. You have to know exactly what you're getting into and exactly how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Let's leave it there. It's been good to get the chat in real time as well. So now we are going to move to the news desk. Brilliant. Okay, so here we are going to give you this week in news. It's a taste of three of the stories that have been pretty much clicking up a storm through the week. And Matt, this is one that's been coming for a while, but finally some confirmation around a particular Toyota product.
Yeah, it's not the Hilux. It's not the GR Hilux we're talking about this time around. And we're talking about the Tundra, the next size up version of Toyota's Ute. So this is their American-focused pickup truck, rivals the likes of the Chevy Silverado, to name two. The 50 is another. And we are going to see F-150 sold through Ford dealerships in 2023, and it looks like there's a very good chance the Tundra will be on sale from 2023 as well, late in the year. So Toyota is going to be working with Walkinshaw Automotive Group. So Walkinshaw is the real beneficiary here. They already work on a bunch of different Utes to convert them to right-hand drive. And yeah, the new Tundra Ute, which amazingly is a V6 petrol hybrid turbo Ute. So unlike those other Utes with their big beefy V8 engines, this one is a pretty punchy thing, 286 kilowatts and 650 Newton meters for a dual cub Ute that's pretty big. It's a pretty big vehicle. So it is going to definitely have a market in Australia. There will be buyers out there who are just drawn to it because it's a Toyota, and also the inherent reliability that is known from coming from that brand. So really looking forward to it. I can't wait to have a drive of one at some point.
I'm looking forward to the comparer. I mean, it's going to be a Ram 1500, an F-150, the whole. It's on.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Okay, so all the details are in that story on the site. Sorry, Tom.
Hybrid power as well, which is kind of exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Kind of relevant to what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Tom, different proposition altogether, but we're still in the kind of electric realm. Fill us in on this other story that's been clicking pretty strongly during the week.
Okay, so we've got a story that's got a bit of a cheeky headline that says has BYD buggered up, and basically this is probably one of the most hyped launches left this year, because we've had Tesla Model Y now, so like all these kind of hyped cars that have come. We got Corolla Cross still to come, but BYD are launching with what is going to be, in some states, the cheapest electric car you can buy, the Atto 3. And so it's a little SUV. It's fully electric. It comes from China's BYD. They're a new automaker to our market. And people have been very keen to get their hands on this, and it already has like this enthusiast cult following. The issue is, up until this point, they've been promising things like a 7-year warranty and, the benefits of EV ownership. But now it's been revealed that they're actually just going to have a 6-year, 160,000 kilometer warranty, which is much less than was originally promised. And the service pricing is the biggest surprise, because it's actually remarkably expensive, like combustion car expensive, not just comparative, but also in terms of the timing. So you need to service the car every 12 months or 20,000 Ks, which is the same as a combustion car. Right. And at that point, you're being hit for amounts between $190 and $661. So, pretty steep pricing. And I think it kind of reveals a little bit of an issue with electric cars sort of launching in our market. And that's, some of these kind of revenue streams have been taken away from manufacturers as they move to the electric environment. Less servicing is actually required, and, stuff like this. So how do they recoup that? And obviously it's kind of hidden in the fine print. So that's what we're seeing here. Yeah.
And also, sorry, can I just say, BYD, be sure to check out our Atto 3 review, which is now live on our YouTube channel and on the website, with all those pricing details in the written piece that Richard's put together, and some surprise findings in the driving section. Absolutely. So be sure to check it out.
And to your point, very jealous that Richard has had a chance to drive it.
That's good on the servicing cost. Like Planes, Trains and Dogs and Cars said, it pays to be cynical in 2022 if they're scraping back a bit of extra wholesale margin on things. Okay. Now, the other one I'll cover off is the prospect of an Audi Ute. And when you think about it, there are two things that jump into my mind. I don't know about you guys, but didn't Mercedes-Benz try that and it was a spectacular failure? And second, where does that come from? And then you go, of course, Amarok, and it's potentially the same platform as the shared Ranger and Amarok projects. And reports are that it will be underpinned by that same platform. So you get that off-road cred and you get the towing ability. And that those people inside Ford that we've spoken to at length through the launch of that car have always said that it's ready and ripe for electrification. You know, the thing has been made to accept that as a future-proofing kind of move, if you like. So, woof, you know, the numbers for X-Class Mercedes-Benz were really small. Mercedes, in a rare misstep, acknowledged it, owned it, pulled the car out of the market. They sold globally far less Hiluxes than Toyota sells just in Australia per year. So Audi would be taking 2 or 3 brave pills to think that they can make it work. Will it be a fully electric truck? It's probably going to have an electric version as well as combustion and hybrid and whatever else. So watch this space. And if you want all the details, that story is on the website.
I actually have a loaded opinion on this. I think that it has to do something spectacular to succeed, because I think X-Class would have succeeded if they launched with the V6. Just saying.
Okay.
100%. I'm with you.
Mind you, I still see X-Classes in traffic and think that they're a Navara. But
and
particularly from the
worth
rear.
more now than they were when they came out, because
maybe.
people are after something different now.
Maybe.
You know?
All right. Well, let's go to what people are after, and that is cars in the garage. Okay. The fresh metal that we have been driving, and Tom, I'd like to start with you. It's in your wheelhouse. Fill us in on what you've been steering, please.
Okay, so I mentioned before that I've been driving the plug-in hybrid Kia Niro up until recently, and I've just swapped it for the new generation version, which is fully electric, because there is no plug-in hybrid anymore, as we know.
Yes. Thanks to you. Yep.
So I've got behind the wheel of that, and there are a lot of really surprising things about it. It's quite different from the Niro that came before it, in that it feels much more futuristic. It's had a big jump, because the previous Niro was feeling quite old by the time they discontinued it. And this new one is packed full of the same sort of parts and technology that you see in the Kia EV6. It's the point where I was sort of driving it the other day, and I thought, well, this is just like a mini EV6. I'm not really sure why it's not called like the EV2 or EV3 or something. Like, it's so similar. And I know, we know Kia and Hyundai want to launch smaller models in that space with those sorts of names. So I'm surprised that they haven't, and it'll be interesting to see where it sits in that kind of future portfolio. But where it sits right now, it sort of has the same power and torque as it did before. So same motor, same battery size, but it does extract a little bit more range. It's a little bit bigger than it was before. It's a lot more sort of technologically advanced than it was before in terms of its cabin tech offering. It has a lot more standard features than it has before, but it's also jumped in price. It's before on-roads price tag is now $72,100, which is pretty steep.
Whoa.
But it feels techy, and it does genuinely get quite a long range. As we know, those kind of Hyundai and Kia electric cars do tend to actually underestimate their own range. So it'll be interesting to see what I get when I actually run it out of range, because I've had it for 2 weeks and I've only used about half a charge.
Right. Well, you've got access to Uber, so if you do actually just run out completely, there won't be a problem. That's cool. That's good. Thank you, and we'll stay tuned for more detail. Matt, I'm going to move to you, and you've been driving something. It's Japanese. Yep. It's more on the premium end of the scale. Fill us in, please.
Surprisingly, very closely priced to Tom's Kia Niro.
Wow.
I've been driving the Lexus UX 300e. So if you aren't aware, and you probably aren't because they don't sell many of them, the UX 300e is Lexus's small electric SUV. And I've been spending, about 3 weeks with this car. It was a gap filler for me after my last long-term car. And I've really liked it. And my partner, Gemma, she's actually driven it a bit more than I have. She loved it. She thought it was great because it had enough electric driving range for her to go to the city and back and not even think about a charge, and she did it twice in a row one time because I forgot to plug it in at night, and it ended up that she came home and had 5 kilometers of range remaining, but she was like, I got home, I'm okay, I don't care. So it just meant that I had to duck down to the fast charger because it wouldn't have replenished the batteries on the regular plug overnight. Speaking of charging, it's got a Type 2 plug, but not a Type 2 CCS combination fast charger. So it'll do a slow AC charge, but not a fast DC charge. And that's on one side of the car. And on the other side, it's got CHAdeMO, the Japanese standard plug.
Right.
So it'll charge it up to 50 kilowatts, I think, or thereabouts.
Wow. Yeah.
So not super fast, but fast enough to get you from 0 to full or 0 to 80% in about 2 hours from a CHAdeMO charger. So luckily, the place down the road from me does have a CHAdeMO charger. So I managed to do that while I was sitting there one Friday night watching the footy and having an ice cream from the servo, because that's what you do now at charge stations, apparently. So, but by the by, the UX300E, underappreciated car. I think it's a really good size for a lot of people. And, $74,000 or thereabouts for the base model makes it fairly compelling compared to something like a Kia Niro EV GT line. If you are okay with it being maybe a bit more conservative and having a bit less range. It's like 305 Ks claimed range.
Matt, so rare for a rugby league enthusiast to be consuming an ice cream rather than some delicious carbonated beverage that would normally go with that kind of activity. Anyway,
they didn't have any of the cola that I like.
That's right. Yeah, I was thinking elsewhere, but anyway.
And for the record, on the range there, I think that is one of the drawbacks of that UX, because the Niro will do 460, and I think I'm going to get more than that on a single charge. So that's worth keeping in mind, along with that CHAdeMO port, which might be an inconvenience for some.
Beauty. Good. All right. Thank you for that, Matt. Thanks, Tom. I'll finish off. Everybody's had their say on the Ranger. I'm going to have my 2 bobs. Been in the Ranger XLT, and that's 64, just over 64 grand before you put it on the road. It's the 3-litre V6 turbo diesel that I was in, 184 kilowatts, 600 Newton meters. So you get that full-time all-wheel drive, on-demand 4-wheel drive, and the 10-speed auto. And the plus is that engine is great. I now understand that its ancestry goes back to Territory and quite a way, but it just works so beautifully with the 10-speed auto. Great ride for a dual cab ute. It's got a long wheelbase, so it tends to even things out a little bit. It's quiet without the audio on. I heard those little turbo whistle every now and then. That's about all you hear from under the bonnet. Yeah. The multimedia is really good. It's well equipped in XLT grade, which is kind of middle of the ladder, if you like. The minus is, I reckon, you've got to wait 6 months for one. We had some recent feedback from fearless leader Mal, who said a neighbour of his had ordered a Ranger and it was about 6 months. I suppose that's going to vary by grade, but that's roughly what you're looking at. I'd go for a cargo divider and hard tonneau because I think it's a real multi-role proposition. That kind of car could be for work, play, family, the whole bit. I reckon it's got the credentials to fulfil that kind of multi-role.
Yeah, I agree, JC. And I'll just like to add about the fact that it's quiet is such a huge step forward compared to the last Ranger, because it was bloody loud inside. Yeah, this one is really refined. So
super refined. And we were 5 up. The whole family got on board and we went on a lengthy trip. No complaints, ventilation in the back, all that kind of stuff. Cool. Plenty of power options. It was really, really good. Nice. So there you go. And with that, we have reached the finish line.
Cool.
So thanks to all our listeners and viewers. And thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
And thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And well done to our production multitasker, Mr. Brett Sullivan. He clearly knows how to have fun in a vehicle under controlled conditions, because today he's wearing a T-shirt saying, "Let's get drunk and drive the golf cart." Jump into the conversation. Cars Guide is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Or traditionalists can email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. Listeners, please take a moment to rate and review the show. 5 is the preferred number. We're sitting at 4.7, so come on, help us out. And viewers, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Cars Guide channel so you can stay on top of all our latest content. But before we go, a mate of mine was telling me about when he was living in Germany and holding and talking on your mobile phone while driving was banned. He went to an electronics shop looking for something that would help him answer his calls legally and keep his focus on driving. Old mate behind the counter offered to have his brother Hans ride with him and put the phone up to his ear when it rang. It was some time ago, but my mate said, no, that won't work. Do you have a hands-free device?
Oh, gosh.